Hi, everyone. No slides on this one, so I'm sparing you that ordeal. How many of you have heard of Bitcoin before today's session? All right, pretty much everybody. Great. We're doing a good PR job. How many of you own or have used Bitcoin? OK, a much smaller number of people. Now, if you have never used Bitcoin, I have a pledge from the other two people who are going to be speaking after me, and I as well will be very happy to help you set up a wallet today. Come see us after these talks. We'll set you up with a wallet. We'll give you a bit of Bitcoin and help you try it out and experience it. Bitcoin is better experienced than explained. Now, I'm not going to give you a Bitcoin, because that's worth quite a bit of money right now. I'll probably give you a pound in Bitcoin. And so you think, well, a pound in Bitcoin, what are you going to do with 1 pound in Bitcoin? Well, what you can do with 1 pound in Bitcoin is about 50 transactions. And that will just give you a glimpse into the kind of thing that is possible with Bitcoin that is simply impossible with any other kind of system. So what is Bitcoin? I'm not going to try and explain Bitcoin in 15 minutes. I wrote a book that answers the question, what is Bitcoin? It's 300 pages long. It was obsolete the moment it was printed, and has to be corrected and updated every 3 months just to keep up with what is Bitcoin. If you do get engaged in Bitcoin, you'll quickly find out that mostly Bitcoin is none of the things you thought it was. It's a lot more and a lot different than what you thought. Many of the people who get involved in Bitcoin describe this experience as going down the rabbit hole. You get this instant effect where you feel that something special, something amazing is happening, and then you start reading about Bitcoin, and then you get obsessed, and then you start reading more about Bitcoin, and then you start annoying your friends and family about it, and you start talking about it at parties and dinner parties, and your significant other goes, oh God, here we go again, it's the Bitcoin talk. And then you get really obsessed, and you read about it for months and months and months, and you don't eat enough, and you get even more obsessed. That experience has happened to a lot of people in Bitcoin, and the reason is that Bitcoin is not just a minor incremental change. It's not a payment network. Bitcoin is one of the most fundamental transformations on the basis of money. And what is money? Because that becomes the center of a conversation when you talk about Bitcoin. You realize that the vast majority of people don't know what money is. We use it every day. And yet most of us really don't understand how it works. Now, we think we understand how it works, but try explaining it to a 5-year-old. And you quickly find out the limitations of your knowledge on money. The average person can't answer more than 3 questions from a 5-year-old about what money is. You quickly get to the question like, Mommy, why can't we have more money? Who makes money? What's it made of? And most parents, after about 3 questions, will revert to the good old, yeah, go do your homework. And that's the end of that conversation. How old is money as a technology? It's not thousands of years old. It's hundreds of thousands of years old. Part of the reason we don't know how old money is because every archaeological site we uncover has evidence of money in it. Beads, feathers, stones. We've seen 4 major transformations in the underlying form of money, from physical objects like beads and feathers, to pressed precious metals coming out just about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. And then over the years, that being transformed through many civilizations, including Greece, where I come from. And then we start seeing the evidence of paper money that is an abstraction of this precious metal. And then in the 1920s and 1930s, we gave up on the precious metal part and went for just paper. Very convenient. And then in 2008, Bitcoin happened. And a lot of people will look at Bitcoin and say, oh, it's a payment network. It's a currency. It's not really that big of a transformation, but that would be a mistake. Bitcoin is a fundamental transformation of every aspect of money. It is the most abstract form of money we've ever created. Now, the name is terrible because it has the word coin in it, and a coin is the most physical form of money you can imagine, and Bitcoin is the least physical form of money you can imagine. And so that can be confusing. Bitcoin isn't a currency, and Bitcoin isn't a payment network. Bitcoin is a protocol and a network-centric platform for recording ownership and trust on a peer-to-peer basis. And that's a lot of fancy words, but basically what it means is that saying that Bitcoin is a currency is like saying that the internet is email. Currency is just the first application. If you have a platform that allows you to record ownership and trust, the first type of asset that you are likely to record on that ledger is obviously a currency. That's the most obvious application, but it's only the beginning. Bitcoin is not money for the internet. Bitcoin is the internet of money, and currency is just the first app. Why is it so hard to grasp what Bitcoin is? Because it changes many of the fundamental aspects of money, and change is difficult. So the experience of trying to explain Bitcoin changes over time. When I first started trying to explain Bitcoin, I was faced with denial. People would tell me, well, Bitcoin isn't real money. I read serious scientists writing entire theses on why Bitcoin isn't real money. And yet, I'd already been living on Bitcoin for 2 years. My own personal experience was a direct counterfactual to the idea that Bitcoin is not real money, because if I can use it to buy goods and services, it is money. If I get paid for my goods and services that I'm offering, it is money. So denial was the first reaction. Then we went into anger. Well, Bitcoin is really all about drug dealers, terrorists, pedophiles, criminals. I had people ask me on air whether I was a drug dealer when I tried to explain Bitcoin to them. They didn't ask the HSBC banker if they were a money launderer, but they asked me if I was a drug dealer. That's kind of bizarre. So what comes after anger? Bargaining. Well, now we've reached the stage of bargaining. Bitcoin is really disruptive. Bitcoin is really strange. Bitcoin is really different. So let's try and polish it up. Let's try and smooth out the rough edges. Let's make it more palatable to regulators, more comfortable for the corporate boardroom. Beyond Bitcoin, unleashing the power of the blockchain. Bitcoin is just a silly currency. The really important stuff is the blockchain. So now we go through this great marketing whitewashing experience where we pretend that what we want is disruption. This is the buzzword of the time. Disrupt. We want to disrupt our industry. We want to disrupt our own company from the inside out. We want to change the way banking is done. Really? Great. Let me tell you about Bitcoin. Open, decentralized, permissionless innovation, completely without borders. Identity and KYC? Won't do it, can't do it, that's not a bug, it's a feature. Control? No, can't do it, that's not a bug, that's a feature. You want disruption? Here you go. Radical disruption. Completely decentralized money with no borders. Well, calm down there, Che Guevara. We said disruption, but we didn't mean that kind of disruption. How about we take this massively decentralized, completely open, borderless, network-centric, uncontrolled, without intermediaries, and we add a bit of control. Centralize it a tiny bit. Maybe throw some KYC in there. And then we'll rename it the blockchain. And now we can start investing in this stuff. And if you look at what companies are being invested in Bitcoin, it's the ones that aren't doing blockchain. It's the ones that are doing centralized banking with Bitcoin currency without any effect on the blockchain, without any of the decentralization, without any of the disruptive potential. Bitcoin is not smooth jazz. Bitcoin is punk rock. Deal with it. It is disruptive. And the reason it is disruptive is precisely why it's so difficult to swallow and swaddle in traditional investment terms. Bitcoin is the first completely decentralized transnational platform for exchanging value. It has no borders. It doesn't care whether you like the transaction or not. It is entirely based on mathematical verifiability. It is the internet, unleashed, unvarnished, unpolished, and uncensorable. And if you can't swallow that pill, there's a startup out there that's going to take that innovation and is going to disrupt your industry, because they can swallow that pill. In fact, as we saw with the internet, when the first tier of telecommunication companies wanted to control and polish and make the internet nice and cozy, and came up with ISDN, or colored faxing, or CompuServe. A few of the third-tier companies who knew they couldn't compete on that playing field took the internet and used it as a Trojan horse to disrupt the entire telecommunication industry. They used that early first-mover advantage. If you think the Bitcoin companies are going to get a banking license, play nice with the regulators, and do something mild just to be able to jump on to some kind of retail shopping environment, you're missing the point. Bitcoin is about the other 6 billion. Bitcoin is about unbanked and borderless. Bitcoin is disruption. It's disruption on a scale that most people haven't even begun to imagine. So if you are in a startup, understand that not having a banking license is an advantage in Bitcoin. Bitcoin solves the #1 consumer problem in finance. How many consumers have you heard go, hey, you know, I'm with Lloyd's Bank, but I'm really thinking of switching to Barclays because they have a robust KYC program. I'm worried that I might accidentally money launder myself, so I want to make sure that I have some nice protection from their compliance department. Consumers care about identity theft, which has become a plague upon the industry. And the reason it has become a plague upon the industry is because personally identifiable information must be collected by every intermediary on every transaction and hoarded, creating these giant honeypots that attract hackers like flies. And you can't protect that information. If you're realistic about it, no one can protect that information. The banks can't protect that information. The retailers can't protect that information. The credit card companies can't protect that information. The NSA can't protect that information. The US government was unable to protect the clearance and background data for giving security clearances. That's all of the information on drug addiction and criminal convictions and sexual perversions of every single person in the US government who got a clearance. And they couldn't protect that information. And you think you can protect my social security number or my date of birth? Don't fool yourself. The only way to protect personally identifiable information is to not collect it. And guess what? Bitcoin, by design, from day one, solves the problem of identity theft by basing trust on verifiable transactional mathematics, on programmable money, on the ability to do automated escrow and transaction verification without intermediaries. And in such an environment, identity is not required for trust. And just there, you have one of the biggest breakthroughs in payment systems that we've seen in the last 50 years. So what do we do in response to that? We try to ram KYC on top of Bitcoin and say, hey, let's collect information on everybody who's doing Bitcoin at an exchange.